I'm making a beer today. We have water, and I'm going to add gypsum to clarify it a little bit, to treat it before we start heating up the mash. A giant pot. It's actually 5 gallons. So we're going to use that to cook, to make our wort before we start fermenting. A 5-gallon batch of beer, which the instructions are described right here. This is from Grizz at SF Brewcraft. We're going to make a Belgian-style golden ale. And he recommends putting 1 teaspoon of gypsum into a 5-gallon mash tun. And we're limited on supply, so we're using... This is going to be our mash tun too, but mash tun basically has to stay the same temperature for a period of time. Grizz calls for 60 minutes, so we're going to do our best to keep it at what he says for 60 minutes. But we'll get there first. We have to bring this up to temperature and add some gypsum. And then we'll start our mash, which is going to be converting these grains, which are barley here, and oatmeal is also in here, and put it in this little sock. We're going to convert the starches in these grains into sugars that can be fermented. This calls for 60 minutes at 155 degrees Fahrenheit. This is hard to read, but basically it says oats, 1 pound of oatmeal, and 2.5 pounds of some kind of barley. I don't even know. I don't know much about this barley type. It's not a roasted type, but it's probably pretty typical knowing him. Easy to find. Anyway, right now our water is at unable to focus. Yeah, it's actually at 70-something degrees Fahrenheit. So we have to wait a while for this giant mass of water, which is around 4 gallons, to heat up. And you can see some gypsum on the bottom. It's been a while. We got our temperature up to about 160, and the ideal temperature is 155, as it says on the chart from Grizz. But I'm going to put all the grains in right now. So what I did is, there's a plastic bag full of grains. I just put it in this grain bag, and you just drop it in. It's going to lower the temperature a little bit. And you want to make sure that you can grab it out when it's done. But this is just basically a tea. So I'm going to do this and put the top on. And that should contain the heat for about an hour. We have to set our timer. Hold on. All the water in there. So let me show you this a little bit. So you can see the grain bag in the water. It's about 160. You can't really read that because the camera's terrible. But this water is going to stay. This water will stay at about 160 for about 10 minutes or so. So I got to make sure that it stays above 155 the whole time. Otherwise, the starches will not convert into sugars, and we won't be able to make a beer. I'm doing a partial mash, and there's some additional sugar that we're using. Dry malt extract. We're going to add this once we start a boil, and that'll give the yeast something to eat. It's been an hour, and now we need to do something that's called sparging the grain, the malt. So we have this giant bag full of grain that has a bunch of sugars inside of the bag, and we want to try to get all the sugar out we can. So what we need to do is hang it here and let it drip for a minute. I'm going to review this. This is all, it's wort. This will eventually be beer. It's a little golden. The color's not coming out very well in this video, but we're going to let it drain out from the bottom here. And then we're going to rinse it out with cold water. Rinse this bag of oats and barley with cold water. And then, or with water rather. And then we're going to add it to the wort. And then we're going to add the rest of the dry malt extract. I've added the dry malt extract. You can see a lot of it on the top. It needs to go into solution. And the foam is because I don't actually know what the chemical process is, but I could look it up. Basically, if you add sugar to water that's boiling, and a bunch of this sugar, it's going to boil over unless you're stirring rigorously, or it's boiling rigorously. It's like when you cook pasta and it starts boiling, and the starch goes over, and it comes out of the pot. That's the same thing. A lot of people, rookie mistake. This is a rookie mistake. Shouldn't be letting it do this, but I did, and I tried something new, and this is what I get. So you can see what the color of our beer is roughly going to be. Still a little foam from the dry malt extract, but it's heating up, so this goes away once it starts boiling. We're going to add half an ounce of these hops. Oh my gosh, they smell so good. Oh. And we're going to add this thing called a Whirlflock, which is actually a clarifying agent. I was advised to use this by Grizz and the guys at SF Brewcraft instead of using some of their clarifying agents. You can use to get things that are in suspension in the beer, in the wort. They're charged, so they basically they'll go down to the bottom, so you can filter them out easier. So we're just gonna add the hops in. About half of this package. And the reason you do hops in stages, the first one is for preservative. The very first hops you add at the beginning of the boil is for preservatives. Halfway through, it's half for preservatives, half for flavor, and then you want to add a bunch of hops at the end if you want hops flavor in your beer at the end of the boil. The boil lasts for an hour total normally. And once that's done, you have to cool it off as fast as possible. So we're gonna add hops one more time at 10 minutes before the end of the boil, and then at the end of the boil, we're gonna cool this stuff off and put it in our. Wort's done. The boil's done, I should say. Now we're cooling it off. I'm doing the old-fashioned method because I don't have a wort chiller, which is just a copper coil that you can run cold water through, and you just put it in whatever you're boiling your wort with. And run the cold water through, and it's a heat exchanger. So I don't have that, so I'm just doing it the old-fashioned way, which is putting it in cold water in my sink. And it's still steaming. Temperature's about 178 or so. And you know, I've done this a few times, and it's ridiculous. It takes forever. The goal is to try to get this down, the temperature down as fast as possible to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a temperature it's gonna, basically room temperature that's going to ferment at. Once it gets there, put it, filter the wort, put it in the carboy, which is right here. It's ready for me. And add the yeast and take off. Siphoning. Filtering. Carboy. Yeast. Now we wait.